What drew me to this work was just feeling called to talk, to start connecting with people who were similar or who had similar interest, or even just a place for me to understand what I am. That's how I started all this. And as I've been thinking about those of you who are just feeling that calling to be public in some way, to speak, to use your gifts, to be who you are and be that in the world, rather than have it be something that's hidden about you or something that is just kind of in the shadows. I feel like so many people right now are being called in that way. They're feeling this sort of call to be public in some sort of way, or to share, or to put themselves out there. And one of the biggest barriers I see to people coming forward is just the psychological process of trying to reconcile what that means, like the how part. But how do I do that? And then as soon as you start asking how, we start wondering like how it works. Well, how does it work online? And how do you do business online? And how? And what happens is that how process, it's almost like it drains us of all the inspiration up front of why we're even feeling called. Because what I personally feel is really going on is that we are being called to surface, and we're being called to speak or share or just be seen in whatever way that it is for us all individually, because we're meant to strengthen each other. And we're meant to feel connected. We're meant to feel like we're not alone. It's important that we do so, because there has historically been a wound on this planet, specifically with mystics, with healers, with women and intuition, a holocaust of that. And where literal trauma in the body and in the psyche, in the memory of what we are, that if we step into what we are, we will be killed. And I don't believe that that's necessarily a thought process individually each person is going through, but it's something that echoes in the background. It's a survival mechanism that pulls in the background, because if you're not socially accepted, you die. That's how it's been for a long time. And even though now we don't actually, at least in America and in a lot of the first world countries, we don't publicly execute people, but we still publicly shame, humiliate, intimidate people who are public. It's still normal to do that. That's how we control people. That's how we control the narrative, is by shaming, intimidating, and bullying anyone who feels or thinks differently. And so what happens as people like us just start realizing that, okay, it's okay for me to just speak about my perspective, and it's okay for me to give a voice to my experiences, and it's not only okay for me to do this, but there are so many other people that are similar to me. And right there, it takes away the lie that we believe that we're the only ones, and that we are somehow alone in our thinking, or that just because it's not a public, any conversation or anything we feel personally may not be a public discourse, doesn't mean it's not a discourse that's happening in the astrals on every level. And how many people, so many people, you even hear this with people who are public, they know they're walking this very thin line of saying what they truly think and feel and what they truly do, especially if it would be considered woo in any way, and what they are showing the world that they're doing. And the reason we're so careful about all of this is because of triggers. We're careful about all this because of triggers, because it is a highly triggerable time right now. And when you triggers can be positive, negative. They can be extremely healing. They can be extremely detrimental. And so anyone who's thinking differently, doing things differently, just being something different, it can, on a subconscious level, cause this sort of trigger, this collective trigger about like, oh wait, something different's coming, something that's not in my awareness, and the ego itself is kind of on high alert. And where we go wrong, in the sense of where we use triggers in a negative way is when we forget who we are, and we forget that our worth is innate, and we forget that we are directly connected to source, and we forget that we are sovereign, and we forget that we have a choice, and we forget that it's all about vibration, that when I'm in fear, that's a particular frequency that I'm running and a particular storyline that I'm telling, not necessarily that I'm legitimately in danger. And so what I'm getting at here is that there's this subconscious collective trigger that's been kind of going off, and people are you just feel it. You feel it collectively. You feel it in the air. It's this like a highly triggerable time. And the reason I believe people like you are being called to step up is because as a highly sensitive person or as an empath, you have had to deal with being in that state your whole life and figuring out how to soothe yourself and figuring out how to understand what people really mean, even though their energy might be threatening or might feel threatening, because you're sensitive to the subtle things. You're sensitive to what people's energy body's doing, even though their words might be doing something different, even though their conscious awareness might be doing something different. You have sensitivities that play into how you've been able to survive this long. And there's something about knowing how to self-soothe, knowing how to soothe on any level. And there's a multitude of different ways, modalities people use to soothe, but all of them are needed right now. And I think that people who have a skill of being able to feel in any sort of way, we're all sensitive to different things, but whatever you're privy to, whatever you've learned to develop a keen sensitivity to, and you tune into it without even having to think about it, that is like a direct connection to a line in the collective that is triggerable. It's like a fault line. If you think about earthquakes, you're directly connected to that fault line. And the thing they say about fault lines is what makes them dangerous is when they haven't erupted in a really, really, really long time, when they haven't sort of had a mini trigger go off. And collectively, because we have on this planet suppressed and suppressed and suppressed our true feelings, our true emotions, what we're truly going through, that is coming up. So it's needed right now. Little triggers all over the place is preferable to one big massive trigger where the planet itself is like giving birth. And so it's intentional. These triggers that are going off are intentional. And as they go off, in every little micro situation and macro situation, people like you are being asked for. You will naturally be drawn into that because you've naturally been drawn into that your whole life. You know how to soothe triggers. And it can be triggering for healers and people like us who no longer want to constantly be drawn to trauma and drawn to heavy things. And so, or some of us maybe are ready to step into that. Wherever we are, it's triggering everybody, meaning it's triggering you too. Your gifts are sort of being challenged because where you are the most highly sensitive is where you're going to be the most vulnerable to this. And that's why right now, what makes you step into transcending your old self, step into more of a mastery of your gift, is when you put yourself first, when you give yourself what you need, because what you end up doing is you soothe that particular fault line that you're connected to on your triggerable line. So we're triggerable in areas where we're the most vulnerable, where we've experienced the most trauma. And that's where we're most highly protective of ourselves and highly protective of others. And that's where it's easy to sort of get, when we're triggered into survival, where we forget that the other is us. And we forget that we're programming the matrix at all times. And so what we're thinking and feeling and believing and acting on is what we're telling the matrix, what we're telling ourselves that we are. And that's why right now, why people are highly triggerable. We need people who can help soothe the conversation, who can help just bring peace to like just more calm, just more like we got this. When you calm the trigger down, that's when you remember, oh yeah, there's an infinite amount of solutions here. And if I think about this calmly, if I look at this objectively, I will always be led in the right direction. And what I believe is happening as people feel called to step out, they immediately start thinking of the how, the online business world, and other people. which throws you out of alignment. Because what I feel like is actually being called for right now is for you to totally fine-tune and master what you've been learning this whole time in your life, and that is how to soothe your own triggers. So it's time for us to fully step into thriving, no longer being in survival mode. So whatever that individually looks like for each person, the reason why this is so crucial is because this trigger is being triggered on your fault line as well, so where you are most vulnerable, and that's directly connected to your gifts. So if you choose to keep putting other people before you, you end up in a vibration that's similar to what you've been doing all along, but the momentum's going faster because you've been growing, so it's gonna feel worse and worse and worse, like intolerable. It will become intolerable until you do blow, and this is happening across the board. This is a good thing, but what is needed, I'm sure you can feel it when you tune into the grid, what's needed is just no matter what. Because everyone is justified in how they feel. The trigger is justifiable. Like, no matter what, it makes sense. But the most important thing is what we do with all this energy. Because a trigger is an enormous amount of energy, like an earthquake. And it can be ridden like a wave. We have way more control over this than we even realize. Each individually, as we individually calm our central nervous system and our fault line, where that fault line is within us, we send that out. And because it's where we are most sensitive and most vulnerable, it's also where we're most powerful. So if we calm the grid, if we calm all our personal electromagnetic field, we calm that in a powerful way on the planet. Because again, you're a fault line. So you like ease the birth pains that the planet's going through. And I feel like it's such a good analogy because it's like all the midwives, those of us who our souls feel like it's helping to birth the human soul, the new human, the new consciousness that's coming on this planet. We are like the midwives bringing this through. And again, that's on a fault line because this Holocaust that happened with women, thousands and thousands and thousands of women that were murdered, brutally murdered, most of them midwives or herbalists. So it's the very thing that is needed on the planet is the thing that has been silenced. And the collective did it because it's powerful and because we're suspicious of power. And because when you're in the victim, aggressor, savior paradigm, power is used as a game piece, as a ploy, rather than it's innate in every person. If you're in lack, power is dangerous because there's not enough. When you're in an abundance mindset, when you remember who you are and what you are, that you're a creator, and that your experience is determined by your resonance, and your resonance is something that you can actually modulate, and you modulate that by tuning into how you feel, it changes everything. And it's no longer fearful if someone's powerful. At this point, it's fearful if people do not realize they're powerful. Because when you don't realize you're powerful, and you don't realize how powerful your energy field is, and what you're connected to, what fault lines you're connected to, and you get triggered, and you go into war mode, you may just be, a lot of these people that are most vulnerable are connected to very vulnerable parts of the planet. So if they go into war mode, it hits just the right points where we go into massive, massive war on the planet. Or we hit just the right points and we respond just enough that we go into massive healing. And both are happening, and both are going to play out all the way. And there's an infinite amount of ways in each paradigm that all that plays out. So we don't have to be fearful of missing the boat. We're choosing it moment by moment by moment. We're choosing which reality we experience, or you could say how we experience these birth pains. We're choosing it by how we line up, moment by moment by moment. And so I feel just extremely called to say that those of you who are feeling that call to line up to your thriving, to line up to your thriving. And you also know that your thriving is directly connected to your sensitivity and your gifts. It means you have to include all that you are in the equation. And I feel like if you allow yourself to trust that you are being called and what will support you is the life force within you. And that this is not about now I'm going to do something that's valuable so I can earn money, or that I can prove that I'm worthy enough to have abundance or worthy enough to thrive. It's that you already have it in you, and you're allowed to tap it, and you're allowed to invest it, and you're allowed to direct it in a way that feels soothing to you, because what matters is that your whole central nervous system is soothed, and you're able to tune into your heart, which is your power, your superpower, and help activate your gifts, your intuition, your gifts, and help birth this shift that's happening, this consciousness shift. And I know every single one of us, like you're feeling all around you, people, they're coming unhinged. People that have held their shit together their whole life, that have always fancied themselves non-emotional, they don't get, they don't consider that part. They're getting triggered enough to have to deal with their shit. And that's causing this focus to be more internal and more on taking responsibility and more on, okay, what can I do? Because I'm so triggered right now, and I know that makes me feel powerless. So what do I actually have any power over? And I feel like if you feel that temperature and then feel your gifts, where do you feel most excited about being a part of that conversation? You're needed there. People who are able to navigate the mysteries of the heart, the internal world. And there's those of us who have been studying the heart our whole lives. Our hearts were broken at young ages, or we were experiencing and witnessing the broken heart, and we've been observing this for a very long time. There are a lot of pearls that we have, and it's time to invest them, because as we give them, we're saying that we're valuable, and our lives have been valuable up to this point. I feel like so many of us especially those of you who've been through a lot of trauma and have overcome a lot, but it's like I feel like there's this energy of, well, what do I do with all this? Because it's been your whole life. It's shaped you. You've observed it. You've integrated it. You've had to look at it from a trillion different angles. You've had to find modalities that have helped you get free from old programming, from being manipulated and controlled by others. Because being sensitive and being in a world where the primary program is lack, you easily can be manipulated. So the fact that you are even here and in this conversation with me shows that you have a massive amount of information that you have assimilated through and found a way to not only survive, but begin to truly step in your heart and thrive. And that is valuable. Knowing anything about the internal world, about being empathic, about understanding others, about understanding the world of the heart, because it's not like the mind. It's not a logical thing, but it's so powerful. So again, the heart is the most powerful electromagnetic field we have. The human heart collectively, our collective heart, is the most powerful. And when people are triggered, that's when it's the most dangerous, because the heart is so powerful. And that's why it's also the most catalytic and the most there's opportunity at times like this, unlike any other times in history. These are massive, massive, massive energy shifts that are going on right now as people get triggered, and these little tremors are going off. So the question is, what do we do with these tremors? How do we deal with these tremors? And so many of you that are called to this conversation, you are a master of knowing how to deal with tremors, of how to calm down a trigger. That is what's needed on such a deep level. And I say that as if it's simple, but this can encompass any sort of healing modality. Some of you do it through art and expression. Some of you do it through relationships. Some of you do it through energy work and intuitive work. But it's an artistic interpretation of the human story that helps us understand it rather than go to war with it. And that's sort of what's needed. I feel like it's a renaissance right now of artists that are healers, like art healing, the heart, the mysteries of the heart. You're called. And so going back to what I was saying earlier about the how, not worrying about the how, and just tuning into your gifts, double down on your strengths. In a sense, it's go time. It's not like, oh, I'm going to plan a business. No, this is about answering the call of the universe, of why you're here, and tuning into that to the deepest levels of it. Put the how aside and the what aside, because that will all come if you line up to what you're meant to do with this knowledge that you have, with this wisdom. If you line up to thriving yourself, everything will come. I think that's why there's that verse, seek first the kingdom of God, and everything will come after that, and it's righteousness. And I think what that means is, what does heaven on earth feel like? We are not bringing heaven on earth if we are stressed out and terrified and going around in terror telling people apocalyptic scenarios. That's what happens in a triggered state. But people who can hold heaven right here on this massive shift, it's the epitome of tuning into creative energy, creative sexual energy. Because those same sort of tremors that can happen in deep fear and trauma can happen in ecstasy. It's all about how you're riding it, and how well you're receiving it and trusting it, and also resisting in all the areas that feel good to resist in. It is like learning how to have an ultimate orgasm of your soul, your soul's expression. And that's why listening to the urge of your soul is going to be the most powerful thing that puts you in alignment with exactly where you're meant to be. It's palpable. It's super palpable. Following urge, the urge of your soul in your solar plexus. And that means just bursting through all those shackles that are of shame, because shame blocks the solar plexus, and we feel shame about where we have power, but yet it's our power that's needed right now. The power to imagine, the power to intuit, the power to feel, the power to love, the power to nurture, the power to allow life and receive life and make love to life and love it. That is what's needed. So wherever you fall into place in that, wherever you're riding the energy right now, make love to it. Like, spin it around, use your magic, and make love to it in the most creative way you can. However you use your creativity, your gifts, your whatever it is, but make love to this energy, because then you take what could be chaos and you shift it like an artist, like a master, into something beautiful, into a little piece of heaven, a little pocket of heaven. And that does something on the grid. And the more of us that do it, the stronger that it gets. There's strength in numbers. And I think it's important that we just really support each other. And how we support each other as highly sensitive people, or empaths, or intuitives, or artists, is by stepping into our art and just allowing other people to step into their art, and getting out of the comparison, the only some people can do it and it has to be done this way. And as soon as we make it about the online, like how it's supposed to be, we lose connection with the inspiration, and that it's meant to be inspired, and just let that overtake you. Let it consume you. Let it literally consume your auric field, so you just resonate powerfully. That's all that matters. And then your signal is so powerful that you attract exactly who you're meant to. And that is how I'm realizing more and more and more, as I undo and try to figure out the business side, I realize, no, like, I'm meant to step more into just the pure inspiration and let go of the how more and more and more, and just show up no matter how it looks. Just show up, because it's taking form right now. There's so much going on. So I just want to encourage you to allow it, and just take time completely away from the how, and let the fire burn you. Let it just consume you until you are so consumed that you just know the next step to take. It's so clear, because you can't, it's that orgasmic sort of like, I'm moving towards life. I'm moving more towards this. And it's a surrender, but it's also a giving. It's both giving and receiving. Allowing life, allowing yourself to feel good. The most rebellious people right now on the planet are the ones who are allowing pleasure into their life, despite all that's going on, that can find a way to ride these waves with pleasure and with joy and with passion and with conviction, but with the intent to restore the heart of humanity, not to destroy it. That is where I feel like so much action is on the grid, and that's where you're needed. And the only way to line up to it is through your deepest soul's passion, which you can't get if you're denying how you truly feel, if you're denying what you truly want, if you are in any way suppressing your real desires, the deepest desires of your heart that go way beyond helping people. It goes into your heart and into being the creator that you are, fully stepping into your power, fully making love to your life without regret and without fear. That is what's called for right now. And everything will fall into place from there. It's the alignment of the heart, the restoration of the heart. And this requires, at this point in time, so much skill when it comes to understanding the heart, because if the heart's being restored, those fault lines where it was broken are being triggered. The heart walls that we put up to protect ourselves are being triggered. So how we deal with this trigger says everything. It's going to determine what reality we catapult ourselves into, because it is a catalytic time. You're jumping, and it's just getting further and further apart. So what wave you're on matters. It matters, and I think that alignment is the crucial alignment, way more. So anyway, if you guys want to dive deeper into this, I've talked to you a lot about the Gen Magic class, and I've decided this just came to me last night, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. Because I feel like as I've recorded the audios, it's an audio course, I feel like just more and more and more of the conversation is coming, and I'm meant to continually weave around these topics, the topics of how to deal with triggers, how to dissolve shadow contracts so we can fully line up to our power, our gift, our creative abilities. And it feels like an ongoing conversation. So I'm going to just keep updating. I'm going to keep just adding videos to this course. It's going to be like a continual online course, but once you get it, you're just in it, and every time you just always have access to the upgrade. And I'm curious to see what this conversation does. But what I did is I opened a private Facebook group like this one, but for everyone taking that class, you don't have to be in it because it's not being taught live, but it's like that way we can kind of have a conversation about what's going on in the process of dissolving our shadow contracts and learning how to deal with our triggers. And because I feel like we're all part of the conversation, and we easily get triggered with each other, very easily. And learning how to be online and deal with the triggers that come up online, and just come up from even just the fact that there's a camera here and there's this technology between you and I, that a lot of times triggers me out of what, if I were face to face with you, energetically would be being transmitted. So I don't know if any of this calls to you, but the point is, just if you want to join the Gen Magic class, it's going to be continually upgrading. So I'm excited about it. So let me know if you do. I put a link in the class before, but I'll put a link again if you want to go deeper. And then also, I'm going to be opening a few more mentoring spots for next month. I opened 6 this month and filled them really fast, and I've had a lot of you ask about it. So I will open just like one-on-one sessions, probably another 6 in whatever month we're going into. Are we already in May? My gosh. So June. My gosh. So for June, I'll open 6 more. So anyway, just stay tuned. If you want that, if you want a session, let me know. So anyway, all right. Much love, guys. Hope you're doing well.